which we only had a few just in order to have our own eggs and everything and all that type of stuff. But my family has been tracked since 1709, right up until, because I go out and do presentations all over the place. And in 1907, the city of Fall River wanted the north side of Watuppa Lake to become the reservoir that supported the mills, gave electricity to the mills, and also provided water, drinking water. And so they took half of the 200 away by eminent domain. And we were still on that half that they needed to take back to protect the water, the reservoir. And my family refused to leave, and so they cleared 5.5 acres on the buffer land. Every reservation, every Indian community has a buffer land where the men go hunting or fishing, or we bathe in certain waterways that are part of the buffer land. The buffer land is all woodlands. And so they cleared 5.5 acres of the woodlands at the highest point of Indiantown Road, and found a vacant house that was vacant by an English family that was big enough for my family back then to move into. So we've been on the buffer land on our 5.5 cleared acres since 1911. And my family has continually chosen female stewards of the land from now for generations out. So when I pass over, my ashes will be spread across the land, and the next chosen steward, female steward of the land, will then be responsible to keep it sacred and to protect the homestead.
So can you tell folks the history of the Wampanoag, of course, as you were the first peoples to meet the original colonizers? Can you just give us a little background on that?
Yes, that all happened actually. The colonizers, first of all, they landed here by accident. That's why they called us Indians. They thought they were landing in the West Indies. They tried to come in to P-Town, but the tide and the coastline was too strong, so they couldn't get their ships in. So they came up to an inlet in Plymouth. That's why they landed in Plymouth. And if you've ever been to Plymouth, the rock is no bigger than, so to say they landed on Plymouth Rock is like almost a joke. It's as hideous as the rest of the history that they want to share. So at any rate, Usamikin, which is his Indian name, they called him Massasoit. They still refer to him as Massasoit, but Massasoit in our language means High Supreme Sachem. So he traveled all of his territory and to visit with all of his different bands of Wampanoag people, and each territory may have a sub-chief or something, but all of the bands were led by the women, because the women were the ones who took care of the children, the village, and the elders. That's why when the wars happened here, it was mostly women, children, and elders that were burned when the English burned our villages, because the men were around the peripheral. Interesting. Trying to protect us. Right. And so and we always had dogs as warnings. Dogs were always our friends, and we always had ceremony, and the ceremonies still go on, just not in public. You know, the public thing now is the powwow, where I participate in sometimes, but it's, to me, it's like the Wild Bill Buffalo rodeo show, where white people are sitting around looking at Indians in regalia.
Right.
You know, I'm more interested in going and presenting as a Native American and as Wampanoag a mixed blood Wampanoag to let people know that we're still here. Because if you look at the history books, they killed us all off.
That's right.
So that is my purpose and my mission, and that's what I use the land for, to educate people.
That's beautiful.
That way.
And I know we were at this international conference on prison abolition, just in terms of the history of enslavement of indigenous peoples and the use of the prison industrial complex and its settler colonizer laws. How would you just, speak upon that, or why is it important for you to bring prayer?
Because the indigenous people, and this is a history, we were the indentured servants in southeastern New England before the Africans were brought here.
Yeah.
So it was the native people that built the stone walls, the allotment walls for the English family, that built many of the bridges, that because English people were afraid of heights. So native people we built the canal that goes over to the Bourne, that canal. Many native men died building that canal and that bridge. And so that's a history that is just now, institutions, both public and private, higher ed institutions are just now talking about the enslavement of indigenous people, pre-African people.
Wow. And I know too, there was a story about a Wampanoag man who, I guess really in some way, of course, was used and then ended up going back to England. Is that, I know that was a story I had heard.
Yeah, Squanto.
Yeah.
Right, but Paul Cuffey, whose family, his mother was full-blooded Wampanoag. She was a medicine woman. She was part of what was referred to as Dartmouth, but is now Westport. See, the colonizers keep changing up the names of places.
Right.
And then the maps change. And so only in those private institutions like Brown University, Harvard, will you go in and find the original maps with the original names of the places and the people who lived there.
Interesting.
And the territories. And they're now, most of them are now trying to digitalize their information so that the public can view. Whereas before it was just the scholars that could have access to that information. And so now there's lots of institutions, Harvard, Suffolk, Brown, Yale, they're all digitalizing some of their materials because there's no more story to tell about the English people. What was continued and who has adapted is the indigenous people.
Thank you. Also, just in terms of like what First Peoples are struggling with in Huichin, Oakland, Karina Gold, and all the folks out there. I mean, part of it too is sacred sites, because they're what you are. I guess we're recognized to whatever that means within a colonizer.
Well, not the whole nation is not recognized. Like I identify as a Troy Fall River band because my family existed when there was no federal government. So any of these laws and regulations that are now put forth by the BIA and the federal government, they didn't exist before.
Right.
Before, in 1709, those laws were not right up to the it took them even up to the 1854 is when after the King Philip War, the Pequot War, and the Narragansett Massacre, they started shipping women and children on the very same ships